Hitler and Mussolini truly mean to set the world ablaze, or were they swept away by forces they could no longer master? Behind the slogan of Lebensraum and the fascist dream of a Mare Nostrum simmered boundless ambitions and uncontrolled fears. September 1939. By invading Poland, Adolf Hitler pushed Europe into the abyss of a new war. June 1940. Opening the Mediterranean front, Benito Mussolini extended the flames from the Alps down to the Libyan desert. Every pact signed, every lightning invasion, from the Baltic to North Africa, borders were redrawn by artillery fire. How did the ceaseless gamble for fresh territory collapse? And when did that scheme, poised between cold-blooded madness and sheer opportunism, whirl into an unstoppable storm of events? At the start of 1939, Europe still bore the deep scars of the Great War, which in a little over 4 years had claimed the lives of more than 8 million soldiers. Yet two powers seemed more determined than ever to redraw the continent's frontiers. In Germany, with nearly 80 million inhabitants and an annual output of about 23 million tons of steel, Adolf Hitler fixated on Lebensraum, living space, to be expanded eastward into Poland, Ukraine, and the Caucasus, regions rich in grain, oil, and absolutely vital strategic raw materials. Germany's Wehrmacht expanded at breakneck speed, blatantly violating the strict limits imposed by the Versailles Treaty. By 1935, the army, meant to be capped at merely 100,000 men, already exceeded 500,000 soldiers. In 1936, Berlin formally announced the Luftwaffe, likewise banned by Versailles, and by 1939, it could field more than 4,000 frontline aircraft, including fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance planes. In parallel, the Kriegsmarine embarked on a rapid buildup. Thanks to the 1935 Anglo-German Naval Agreement, Berlin began constructing modern battleships such as Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, and steadily enlarged its formidable submarine arm. On 1 September 1939, the day Poland was invaded, Germany possessed around 50 fully operational U-boats. Overall, on 1 September 1939, the German military machine numbered roughly 3.7 million troops, a truly dizzying leap that clearly showed Hitler's resolve to fashion a formidable war engine able to dominate the continent and, with an expanding Kriegsmarine, to challenge Britain's long-standing maritime supremacy as well. Despite its massive armaments industry, Germany still suffered a severe dependence on imported oil to power its vital tanks, frontline aircraft, and its rapidly growing logistical network. To remedy the shortage, the Nazi regime leaned increasingly on coal hydrogenation, a complex and costly process with limited yield, in order to secure domestic production of synthetic motor fuel. Yet this expedient could not adequately meet the enormous energy demands created by the military's rapid expansion. Securing external supplies, such as Romania's Ploiesti fields or the oil wells of distant Caucasus, therefore became a grand strategic priority, destined to shape Germany's territorial ambitions and the detailed planning of its future offensives. On paper, the Italian armed forces were sizable, yet when Italy entered the war in 1940, they displayed glaring structural limits. The Royal Army could theoretically muster about 1 million men organized into more than 60 divisions, but only a small fraction possessed truly modern equipment. Motorized units were pitifully scarce, and Italian tanks, often of outdated design, suffered from thin armor and weak guns. The field artillery part, drawn from assorted sources, rarely exceeded medium calibers, while chronic fuel shortages severely hampered every attempt at rapid, sustained offensive maneuver. The Italian Royal Air Force could field roughly 2,000 to 2,500 operational aircraft, yet many were biplanes or otherwise obsolete when measured against contemporary British and German standards. Production speed and technological innovation lagged behind Germany's wartime industrialization, and the development of new advanced frontline fighters and modern bombers proceeded sluggishly. In this branch, too, persistent shortages of strategic raw materials greatly and seriously affected both the quantity and quality of the machines available. At sea, the Royal Italian Navy could appear imposing for its impressive tally of battleships, heavy and light cruisers, destroyers, and submarines, yet its frontline vessels, though generally well-trained, lacked radar, endured inadequate air-naval coordination, and, once again, faced crippling fuel shortages that severely restricted operational maneuver. Moreover, the fascist military machine entered a truly global conflict without completing the thorough modernization it required. In practice, Italy was simply not ready for a prolonged, technologically advanced war.
Did you know that most people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed yet? If you enjoy animated maps and history, join our community. Leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the next episodes.
Between 1936 and 1939, Nazi Germany executed a series of bold strategic moves designed to expand its borders without formally declaring war. The first decisive step was the remilitarization of the Rhineland in March 1936, an open and provocative breach of the Versailles Treaty. In March 1938, Adolf Hitler annexed Austria, calmly absorbing its populace and resources in the so-called Anschluss, which further consolidated the Reich's growing power. The autumn of 1938 erupted with the Sudeten Crisis, centered on a Czechoslovak borderland region inhabited largely by ethnic Germans. Czechoslovakia, born after the First World War, possessed substantial border fortifications, a significant heavy industry base, and an army far better prepared than many European leaders imagined. Nevertheless, relentless pressure from Berlin pushed France and the United Kingdom to pursue a desperate diplomatic remedy to avert another continental conflict. The Munich Conference of 29 to 30 September 1938 ultimately handed Hitler the Sudetenland on the solemn pledge, proclaimed before both powers, that it would be my last territorial claim in Europe. In public, the Führer promised peace. In private, he labeled Munich simply a maneuver to gain time, convinced that London and Paris would never risk war to stop him. In the House of Commons on 5 October 1938, Winston Churchill thundered against appeasement. You were given the choice between dishonor and war. You chose dishonor, and you will have war. Buoyed by yet another cost-free diplomatic victory, Hitler quickly moved from bluff to outright breach. Between January and March 1939, he engineered the forced secession of Slovakia, threatened to bomb Prague, and on 15 March, occupied Bohemia and Moravia, creating the Reich Protectorate. No more plebiscites or minorities to protect. This was plain annexation of predominantly Czech lands. 8 days later, he compelled Lithuania to cede Memel and renewed pressure on Danzig and the Polish corridor. Each move was a calculated step forward. Hitler gambled, certain the Western democracies would swallow yet another bitter pill, and the very success of Munich fed his illusion that war could still be avoided. Fearing he would remain in Germany's shadow, Mussolini occupied Albania on 7 April 1939, driven by opportunism and hoping to snatch his own lightning success in the Balkans. The dismantling of Czechoslovakia convinced London that further leeway for Hitler would only postpone the inevitable armed clash. On 31 March 1939, Neville Chamberlain informed the House of Commons that henceforth any German attack on Poland would be met without delay by British and, in parallel, French military action. 2 weeks later, after Italy's occupation of Albania, the same guarantee of protection was extended to Greece and Romania on 13 April 1939. These bilateral guarantees drew an unmistakable red line. The next breach of borders in Eastern Europe would automatically trigger war. For Hitler, who had so far reaped diplomatic victories without a shot fired, the message was ambiguous. He noted the formal firmness, yet remained convinced that in practical terms, London and Paris would never satisfice their own cities for Danzig. On 22 May 1939, with Europe in mounting tension, Rome and Berlin signed a sweeping political-military alliance known as the Pact of Steel. The agreement stipulated that Germany and Italy would fully support one another in the event of war, both militarily and economically. Each signatory solemnly pledged not to conclude separate peace treaties and to coordinate their own foreign policy, sharing intelligence and conducting regular consultations on mobilization plans. Behind the solemn declarations, however, lay deep ideological and practical divergences. Benito Mussolini had repeatedly stated that Italy would not be ready for a large-scale conflict before 1942, or even 1943, owing to its limited industrial resources and chronic fuel shortages. Adolf Hitler, by contrast, considered it essential to exploit Germany's existing, massive military superiority immediately, without waiting for rival nations to rearm. Tension peaked when on 23 August 1939, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Germany and the Soviet Union was formally revealed. The supposedly simple non-aggression accord held secret protocols carving Eastern Europe into strategic spheres of influence, a disclosure that stunned every Western chancery. Through this bold stroke, Hitler obtained firm assurance against a two-front war and, lured by the promise of reliable Soviet grain and oil supplies, felt ready to launch his next move, the invasion of Poland. At dawn on 1 September, the German army smashed into Poland with a coordinated assault of infantry, armor, and air power. It was the first dramatic display of blitzkrieg, designed to overwhelm the enemy with speed and concentrated firepower. This was Hitler's ultimate gamble. Convinced France and Britain would stay out, he saw Poland as a necessary step to enlarge Lebensraum and to strike still farther east. This time, however, London and Paris were bound by written commitments and backed by publics tired of concessions. When the British ultimatum went unanswered on 3 September, the guarantee turned into a formal declaration of war, transforming a string of regional aggressions into a global conflict. The Führer's miscalculation became glaringly clear on 3 September, when London and Paris declared war, even though France still hoped for a diplomatic escape. The decision suddenly surprised significant sections of the German High Command. Their plans had not envisaged a truly large-scale conflict at that early stage. Yet the Wehrmacht's formidable early capabilities soon made the entire world realize it faced a new, sweeping, and devastating test of strength. By early spring 1940, Hitler's Germany had already displayed its formidable power. After crushing Poland within mere weeks the previous September, it launched Operation Weserübung during April and May, swiftly occupying Denmark and Norway. On 10 May, the Blitzkrieg hammer swept through the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, creating a direct path towards Paris. Confronted with this rapid advance, Benito Mussolini, convinced that France was near total collapse, declared war on 10 June 1940, hoping to carve out a coveted seat at the victors' table. Italian opportunism was soon rewarded. French forces collapsed, and on 14 June, German troops entered Paris. The armistice signed on 22 June left most of the once proud French fleet anchored at Toulon and Mers-el-Kebir in North Africa. Britain now feared these strategic ships might fall into Axis hands, radically altering the naval balance in the Mediterranean. To forestall that danger, on 3 July 1940, the Royal Navy carried out Operation Catapult, ruthlessly bombarding the French vessels moored at Mers-el-Kebir. The naval attack sank the battleship Britannia, which exploded catastrophically and killed over 1,000 sailors. The battleships Provence and Dunkirk suffered heavy damage, while Strasbourg managed to escape. In total, approximately 1,297 French crew members lost their lives. This tragic episode bitterly and permanently strained relations between the former allies, prompting many officers and seamen back to the Vichy regime at first, while others joined the Free French forces. At that point, Churchill found himself almost alone against the German war machine, while the newborn Axis alliance gained Italian support in the Mediterranean basin. On one side, Hitler was already looking east, eager to reach the resources of the Caucasus. On the other, the Royal Navy prepared to defend the vital route through Gibraltar and the Suez Canal, essential to British interests in Africa and the Middle East. The balance of power, which only recently had seemed firmly in democratic hands, now lay shattered. The fuse was lit. A Europe in flames was about to rewrite history to the roar of cannons. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments which turning point you believe might have changed the world's fate.